A grand jury in southern Florida has heard testimony in the DOJ's investigation into former President Trump's handling of classified documents.
A former top Trump aide appeared at the federal courthouse in Miami today. The witness worked as a spokesperson for Trump and now runs a pro-Trump super PAC. A separate federal panel in Washington has been meeting for months to decide on whether to charge the former president in the case. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson is with us now. Hey there, Jessica. So why might the DOJ be using a second grand jury in this investigation? That isn't something that we're used to hearing.
It's not something we're used to hearing. It's something we didn't know, which really indicates to everybody, let's say it again, grand juries operate in secret. We only know what's going on if there's a leak. And it really shows you we're kind of on the dark side of the moon in terms of, again, how much we don't know about what's happening. But to the specific question of why two grand juries, obviously, we don't know for sure, but my best guess is because the special counsel, Jack Smith, thinks that venue might be proper or at least a better bet in Florida. Now, why would that be? Well, if we look at all of the events of what happened in Florida, the documents were found in Florida. The National Archives initially asked the former president, give us back these documents once he'd already moved to Mar-a-Lago. The subpoena was issued when he was in Florida. He refused to comply with the subpoena when he's in Florida. And then the search warrant was obtained and executed at his home in Florida. I think you get the point here, which is it is entirely possible that the investigation led them to a place where they think Florida really is the place where if there is an indictment, it should be issued. Now, there are other reasons, like maybe you have another grand jury for convenience of the witnesses. I don't think that's the case. It's also possible that the grand jury in D.C. would charge certain witnesses for certain crimes, whereas in Florida, other people could be charged based on other crimes, again, because venue would be proper in D.C. for some people, but in Florida for others.
It's really interesting. And this is important too, Jessica. Sources are telling CBS News now that a charging decision in this case is imminent. So considering what you've just laid out, what type of charges might we see against a former president? I know that obstruction has been something reported on recently when it comes to how documents may have been moved ahead of an actual search.
So I think obstruction is when you're looking at the federal statutes that are at play here. I think obstruction is one that is very likely, in part because of all the facts we already know. Yeah. Again, the National Archives asking the former president over and over again, we think you have documents, give them back. Then the former president not giving them over. Ultimately, the Department of Justice saying we have to issue a subpoena. He only, it looks like, partially complied with that subpoena. And then the fact, again, that a search warrant was obtained by the FBI, was executed, and they did, in fact, find additional documents. And all the other evidence that, Errol and Lana, we've talked about since, the evidence that the former president might have, it indicates that he might have examined certain documents and essentially told aides either to lie or move the documents. All of that, to me, indicates that obstruction is on the table. One addendum to that, which is that evidence indicates in the Florida grand jury that one of the members of the Department of Justice, Jay Bratt, is actually doing the questioning today. He is somebody who is an expert on the Espionage Act. And so I think that we can't take that off the table either.
Jessica, on Monday, Trump's attorneys met with a special counsel and prosecutors at the DOJ headquarters about this investigation. Talk to us about how significant that is.
So I think it's significant and not. It's significant just in terms of the timing of where the D.C. grand jury is, because typically speaking, meeting with a target or a potential defendant's attorneys is really one of the last steps in the investigation that occurs before you do decide whether or not to charge. Having said that, Trump's attorneys had asked for this meeting 2 weeks ago. It was just scheduled, so we shouldn't read too much into the timing of that meeting. One thing I think for people to know is those meetings tend to be a professional courtesy, allowing the defense attorneys to kind of give their last Hail Mary pass. And it is typically not the case that it would change a prosecutor's mind.
All right, we'll continue to watch all of this very closely. Jessica Levinson, as always, thanks for guiding us through the legal components.